Okay, you're very welcome to the second episode of Inside Atlas, where we look at the tools and the AI first approach that we're taking to customer service in Trilogy. Today, we're going to look at specifically Atlas Chat, and I'm joined by Sam Garcia and James Miller, both partners in crime in this project along the way. So you're very welcome.
Hi.
Cool.
Hi,
Yeah,
Colin.
hey guys.
Thank you for having us.
No problem. Okay, so we will kind of start. I suppose we kind of have a rough idea of how to talk about and kind of go through what we have here. We have rolled out what is we use as Voiceflow is the tool. We call it Atlas Chat, but it's Voiceflow in the background. But we've plugged so much into it that we have our own name umbrella over it. And we very much base this on using Voiceflow as it was when we first evaluated it. I think in June 2023 was the first time we actually tried anything in anger with it. And from there, we piloted it on one or two products. And since then, it has grown to be every product that we support in Central is now in some way going through Voiceflow or Atlas Chat. So right. For me, I suppose it's the easiest part for me is the original, the early days, because that was when it crossed my desk. This was in advance of a offsite VP meeting that we had in Dubai, and we were all evaluating the different tools that we could use to solve the problem that we had. Ironically, the problem that we were trying to solve at the time was our voice phone lines for support queries, and could we alleviate some of the pressure on them by adopting a voice chat system. The product we did it for was a firewall product. We got it working together. At the time, Voiceflow was still very much in the early stages of intent capture, and so we put in a couple of workarounds, which is actually one of the nice things about Voiceflow, is the fact that you can actually, bring in other functionality into the flow and not rely solely on the tools that are in it. And we did manage to make one successful phone call looking for information from the knowledge base for Cario. And that was enough for us to at least see the power that was, and that could be rolled out. And from there, I think it was a 3-day workshop. That was the first day. And I think by the second and third day, every VP had a Voiceflow account and was very quickly getting up to terms and building a Voiceflow for one of our education products.
I remember that the most impressive thing was that it transcribed your surname properly. That's what
that was the test.
Got me into the boat.
Yeah. Everybody was looking at it. Yeah. Everybody looks and goes, "Oh my god!" Now, ironically, when we plugged it into our voice system, which acts as the voice interpreter, if you go live with the system and not their test one, it failed miserably. Which is why it's still not deployed as a voice system. Voiceflow is great, but unfortunately, you have to put a layer above it to get it as a phone line. So, and it was that early stage, we went, okay, well, let's not deploy it for voice. Let's deploy it for chat. That was the 3 days in Dubai. We all came back with a long list of things we had to deploy. And then, Sam, it was pretty much on you to deploy for one of your products.
Yeah, so actually I was set to deploy a different product, right? It was not initially Voiceflow, it was Forethought. We thought that Forethought's idea was more ambitious because what they were promising was that you wouldn't even have to create flows, right? You would write a prompt on how you want the support chat to behave, and then it would take it from there. So, of course, the promise was very good on paper, but then, AI comes with its own uncertainties and hallucinations. So when you build AI on top of AI, the amount of things that can go unexpectedly increases exponentially. So we settled for Voiceflow because it had the right balance between us being able to explicitly define the behavior that we wanted, also being able to do advanced things using external things like JavaScript, calling endpoints, formatting data, and so on. And also it gave us the capability to plug AI wherever we needed it, right? So I remember that I was pretty stressed at the time because I got the mandate. That's why I kind of pioneered the support chat. I got the mandate for one of our products to try to solve everything with AI, right? It was in our AI chat support infancy, and I was told you need to solve everything, like 90%. And AI should be the only support channel that we are going to offer. So it was pretty ambitious. And I remember that the thing went that didn't went that well is that because we were trying to solve so much with AI, we were kind of locking the customers into the chat flow, trying to solve and solve and solve, but eventually they would get frustrated. Maybe we were not too realistic about the amount of things that AI can solve or cannot. And it was very hard for them to get hold of a real human, right? So everything started improving and changing whenever we took a more laid back approach, trying to, yeah, be honest about what we can solve and then hand over quickly without much frustration what we believe uh, what we believe we are not there yet, right? So that was the first product. It took a while to ramp it up to right now. It's currently at 60% resolution, and it's a fairly high volume product. Actually, it has two flavors: an on-premise and a SaaS version. So it's pretty good that even for an on-premise product, which typically are more complex because we don't have that level of visibility into how the customer has configured it and so on. So we are pretty happy how they are performing now, and basically we use that model to extend it to other products with a high volume at the time. So when I was doing that first chat, I think we selected, for example, the 20% of products that generate the 80% of the volume, right? We assign we call DRIs, but basically experts responsible for each of those products. And each one of us, we were doing something else, right? But obviously, there are many commonalities between those support chats. All the support chats need to be able to transfer to an agent, be able to check a status page, be able to do a couple of things, right? And we were all implementing it in a different way. So once the success came with this product I implemented, we started to copy it across the board, and now I believe it's fairly standardized in support to use that as a template and also as the core chat, which we will explain later on what it was. And then James, obviously, one thing is to develop the flow, and the other thing is to publish, make it available, and make it reachable for the user. So James can also explain a bit what we did to make sure that the single entry point for to reach support was AI, because that obviously is what brought us volume to learn and train the the chat and to improve it.
Yeah, so there were a few challenges with that. On one hand, I mean, Voiceflow really starts you off strong because they have kind of that ready-made chat widget that it does a lot of the work for you. It handles the interaction. You can offer buttons. You can offer it gives you a lot of things, and it's very easy to deploy actually, kind of on all of our help centers. Kind of the more challenges we had, I think, were some of the integrations with Zendesk. There was a big question about how we were going to do the chat handoff for a while. Once we get to the point in the conversation where we want an agent to actually speak instead of the AI assistant, how are we going to do that? We There was a lot of Zendesk customization on the help centers as well to kind of redirect users to the AI chat flows as well. And then we also had this kind of separate issue of saying, okay, now that we know that these users are interacting with the chatbot, how do we kind of account for those in terms of tickets, in terms of our metrics? For all of our products to see how we're doing and to be able to report to kind of, the product teams. We like to say, okay, well, we've done this many tickets. This is what they were addressed, and kind of what we focused on. So for that, we were able to leverage the Voiceflow API to kind of go and get all recent transcripts, and we were able to kind of split those apart into individual interactions. There's a lot of information in those transcripts, so a part of it too is getting out the kind of the really important stuff that we want to expose to the customer, what was said by the AI, what was the customer, and then finally importing those. Here is just kind of a sketch of what that looks like. You can see we run it on a 30-minute schedule, and it's basically all done in AWS using an event bridge rule, checking S3 for product configuration, and then interacting with Voiceflow and Zendesk API. So I think this is something that you and Colin have both spoken to, Sam, that one of the really great things about Voiceflow is that it's easy to work with, and that you can connect external tools. And I also think they do a really good job of maintaining their own API, and they give you a lot of power to interact with it that way. You're not necessarily locked into, let's say we wanted to get these transcripts, and the only way to get them is to go to go to the Voiceflow website. That would make it a lot harder for us to do this process. But because they have this really robust transcript API, all of a sudden we can manage all of this on our end, with just a little bit of development on our side. So I think that's something that's really kind of been helpful in this department, is that Voiceflow, they're developer friendly, and they like it that you can interact with chats, you can get the history of chats, you can interact with external APIs all within Voiceflow, and they try to make that very easy for you.
Cool. And we'd be lying if we said it was all plain sailing the whole way through. We've definitely had our moments, and I suppose some are our own making, some are our Voiceflow, some are external, and it has been a learning curve, I suppose, to facilitate all of those, because it's very strange when you're building a chat flow, and like our chats, it does things like it interacts with the status pages. So if there's an outage, it lets the customer know before it even gets too far into it. Look, if this is your problem, it's because there's an outage. But then we had to start putting in status page checks for the tools that we were building it on. So if GPT goes down, that we resort over to Claude, or we go to, agent chat direct. There's all these different steps that we just probably at the start we were not even thinking about. But when you build on that level of technology, it happens. I think one of the major problems we faced, and I think Sam, you had it firsthand, was the intent capture.
Right.
I think it's improved, but
Yeah. So obviously that's one of the most critical components of building a successful flow, right? Because you really need to understand what the customer wants and needs. So the way it works in Voiceflow, and it still does today, but it has been improved, is that after you define the intents, or after you decide which intents you need to listen to, you train them with utterances. What kind of phrases or combinations of words the customers use to refer to things. But obviously, that's not that simple, right? And you don't need to nail it. There's a logic to it. So, but you will enter like 50 phrases of trying to guess how someone would complain about, I don't know, an expired subscription. But they always are gonna figure out new ways of saying it. And it's not only that; it's that the way that Voiceflow was using um, didn't have an LLM component. So I don't know exactly how it was done, to be honest, but it was not really reliable. So customers would say things like, I want a backup of my data, and they would receive an answer, are you sure you want to delete all your instance? And so at the beginning we started doing a lot of checks to make sure that the intent was correctly understood. So the customers would have to confirm with yes no buttons. Also, we moved a lot from intent detection to buttons wherever we could, because obviously it's much more reliable. But we obviously don't want to go above board and do everything with buttons and long lists of buttons. That's not what AI is for, and that's not a good customer experience, right? But now Voiceflow added layer where the intents, they are going to be recognized. Yeah, this is a short list of intents from one of our products. They still have the utterances, so each one of them is going to probably have 40, 50 utterances. But on top of that, you are going to have an LLM saying, okay, from these 5 most likely utterances, which one do you think is the one the customer is referring to? And that's very powerful, because before, for example, if the customer misspelled something, the intent recognition wouldn't understand what they mean, or if they use a different language, right? But now with LLMs, that they are so used to, understand things even when you mistype them, and understand different languages, understand things in ways that are not explained in a straightforward way. I think right now it's much more reliable, and it has come a long way. So now we are happier to rely less on buttons and more on AI to recognize the intents.
Cool. And that is how we ended up with the chatty bot as well. That was the same premise.
Yeah, so the chatbot is a good example of how we increase the percentage of resolution by AI. So initially, we had this a bit naive idea that the customer is gonna enter the chat. We are gonna ask them for a good description. We are gonna send that description to a vector base. We are gonna, and we are gonna give them the answer straight away. So that's what we thought it would happen. But as soon as customers come and they know there's not a human behind, they start behaving weirdly. So please provide a detailed description of the issue you're experiencing. And they would say something like custom report, or I need help, or please help, So it was like, there's no way you are going to get, doesn't matter how good your knowledge base is, you're not going to get a good response for them. And that was something that obviously was, a lot of customers were reluctant to use the chat, and for good reason. uh, I'm not going to say that the customers are wrong when they do that, right? Because they do it for a reason, and we are the ones that have to adapt to their behaviors, right? So for some reason they wouldn't describe the things in chat as they did over a ticket, where they come with explanations and logs and so on. So we had to figure out a way to pull that information from them. And the way we did it is what we call the chatty mode.
Mhm.
So basically, when we ask the customer for a description, we take the description, and as I say, we send it to a vector database to collect the relevant chunks. This is how they are called, the snippets or excerpts from KVAs that are relevant to answer that. But typically, when you do that, every chunk is going to come with a score of confidence, how relevant this chunk it is to answer that question. So now what we have is a mechanism in place in which, if someone says something too generic to give them a good answer, like I need help with APIs, as you can see on the screen, probably the confidence of the score is not going to be too high, right? So instead of us trying to solve it with the information we have available, then we will ask the customer something relevant to increase our confidence on being able to provide a good resolution. So if they say, I need help with the API, our bot would say something like, please provide more details about the issue you're facing with the API. What are you trying to accomplish? Are you having any error message, right? So we iterate through this process. Of course, we have a cap on the amount of times we try asking follow-up questions, so it looks like a natural conversation and customers don't get frustrated. But eventually, the goal is to increase the confidence for us to solve the issue. And in most of the cases, the confidence are going to be increased, and we are going to be able to provide a much better response than we would unless we ask, right? But another thing that we need to be mindful of is that sometimes you are not going to have good knowledge in the knowledge base, or the customer is not going to be explaining it in a proper way. It doesn't matter if you have a couple of follow-up questions. So you also need to set the threshold under which you say, all right, if I never reach 80% confidence that I'm going to be able to solve this, I'm not even going to try, because LLMs always try to solve stuff. It doesn't matter how complex or if they have the knowledge or not. So instead of saying garbage to a customer or having an LLM hallucinating a plausible solution, if we don't reach enough confidence, now we tell the customer, sorry, I don't have knowledge enough to answer that question. Let me transfer you to a live agent. And I think that really increased the experience of the users, and also the amount of things that now we are able to solve or deflect over chat.
Cool. Yeah. And another thing that has come on leaps and bounds, I suppose, is their knowledge base itself. So they had a knowledge base. I think the initial testings, I think we got it just as they'd rolled it out, or very close afterwards. It was quite limited in its functionality. And we were putting a lot of protections in place to not lead the customer astray. Because that's the one thing, I suppose, where forethought was miles ahead at the start when we were evaluating, was
Right.
the actual knowledge base answers, because it could back it up with links and context.
Yeah. Yeah, we struggled a lot to be able to provide a curated list of related articles that the LLM is using to provide the response, right? But now we have that nailed down. But that's a very important component, because especially when you have a lot of, multimedia components, or, you know, yeah, in your knowledge base, typically the chats, the AI chats are only gonna respond with text, because that's what they get from the vector database. So unless you have a mechanism to take the customers to a more extended content or enriched content, sometimes they are going to read through the LLM response, but they are not going to have the full context. So if you provide them good links to good articles, that's going to go a long way on them getting used to also search the knowledge base before reaching us, and also higher probabilities of resolving an issue via AI.
Cool. Yeah. I see James nodding. He's familiar with this fight as well. I think you had some of the rollout for the KBs came across your way as well, or were they kind of tied up?
Well, not so much. I that's always, I guess, in the deployment process, that would always be one of the first things I would check, to make sure that everything is hooked up correctly, is trying to get to a point. And we have so many products. It's always funny sometimes that when I always have to start digging through the KB and say, okay, well, I have to pretend I'm a customer for this product I don't know, to see if I can get a good answer. But yeah, where I think we're at a really great point with it now, where I know for a while, and I guess in some particular flows, and sometimes even with forethought, I would even just copy the name of a knowledge base article and try to get a response. And at the beginning, it would be a bit frustrating. It'd be like, oh well, it almost seems like search could do better than this. But now we don't have that problem anymore, and we're always getting not only one relevant article, but then the next 2 or 3 most relevant articles in addition to that as well. And it's very consistent now.
Yeah, one of the tests I always used to run is I'd search it for an article in a different knowledge base. So I'd search for a problem with a firewall in the email server, and in the early days it would try and solve it, and you're like, look, there isn't. You don't have an email responder. You're a firewall. But look, here's a really good answer, And so yeah, no, it was always an important one to kind of to get right. And I remember, yeah, there was a fight getting the links to output properly, but it's definitely, again, with time and iterations, it's worked very well. And then yeah, I think we already touched on it, the GPT outages. I mean, you can't do anything about it, but it's so funny now that when they have an outage, so much of what we do grinds to a halt. But we do now have checks in place. Isn't that how we've kind of allocated that if it's shown as out, we can at least migrate over to an alternative? Cool. Okay. I suppose then, if we're kind of focusing on the journey, we'll share that famous slide from the last time around as well, because we were talking before we came on air. This is held up every time, because I mean, it is pretty impressive to achieve this so quickly. But it's so funny as well that you can see when we started to get a handle on Voiceflow, how quickly it went up. and how quickly we also deployed. So Atlas Chat is Atlas Chat, but this kind of led to an Atlas Core as well, and that's the kind of what Sam deployed as best in class for one product, stripping it back to all the parts that are applicable to every product, and kind of rolling it from there. Wasn't that how we?
Yeah. So as I said, initially we decided which is the top 20% of products that generate 80% of the tickets, right, of the volume. But then, of course, we had the 80% of low volume products that are still generating tickets, and then you start thinking, is it worth the effort of deploying a chat for each one of them if they are low volume, right? To address the remaining 20%. Obviously, you want to address that 20%, but the effort of rolling out, a different chat for each of the, let's say, 50 products is quite an undertaking. So what we did is a single chat, but flexible enough to receive the information from the product. So the name of the product, the direction where the knowledge base of the product can be found, where's their status page, and so on. So it's a single chat with a single flow. I mean, the flow is complex, but it's one flow that is providing support to all these products. And obviously, James played a critical part on how to be able to multiply or to serve 60 products with one single flow in a seamless way, right? So
Yeah, I guess a big part of that was figuring out how we would manage the deployments on the Zendesk help centers themselves. A lot of these products too, we had the added challenge of some of the very small ones will even share a help center. And the question then is, okay, well, when you're on one page in the help center, how are you going to be sure that you're going to be in the Voiceflow project for Computron versus the Voiceflow project for Verdium? And this is an issue we faced before with chat and kind of other functionalities in the help centers. But the idea is that kind of reading information from that page, a category ID, the breadcrumbs on top of an article, you can use that and then pass in different values to the Voiceflow widget when it's starting up. And by being able to do that, then you're able to say, okay, well, now we're going to use this knowledge base for AI answers compared to that one. And yeah, it was definitely a challenge when it was happening, and we really wanted to launch on as many products as we could. But in the end, it seems pretty stable now.
Yep.
Excellent. Cool. And I suppose then as well, this kind of ties into what was launched. I don't know when this episode goes live, but I think it was launched yesterday. Is the functions finally going live in Voiceflow?
Oh yeah.
Like,
Yeah, that could be massive. I didn't have the chance to play with it yet, but obviously one of the things that we struggle most whenever you have that amount of different projects, they are called projects, but each project correlates to one of our products, right? Is the fact that every time you want to improve something, you need to implement that improvement across all the different projects, right? So if you figure out a better way to, I don't know, to hand off the conversation to an agent, you would have to go to every single, project and do the implementation, which is obviously not really efficient. But now they release functions, and I hope that they can be shared across projects. So finally, we can build a library of components that we know perform great. And even whenever we figure out how to improve them in the future, we only need to go to one place and not to every single product. So that level of modularity was really missing, and it can really change things to make us much more efficient in this game.
cool. Yep. No, it was something we had heard tell of, I think, in the early stages, and we are like, that's going to be huge when it happens. Now, of course, we still have to go back into 40 or 50 projects and put the functions in, but at least we've only got to do it once, in theory, we should be fine. Very good. Cool. Okay. Well, yeah, that's pretty much where we're at today. We're at our 54%, I think it was. We're like, now that's cross ticket and chat, but I mean, the vast majority of our stuff comes in via chat these days. We have it deployed on, I don't think there's any core product anyway that we don't have as we call it, Atlas Chat or Voiceflow in place. I know we actually, I think, are going to speak to Voiceflow themselves in a week or two. So I'll come with a wish list of all the things we've been waiting on.
Great.
From the very complex to the very easy, like where's our date picker?
Oh yeah,
yeah. Can we just put that out to the world now? We'd like a date picker. Of all the, because that's the other thing. Like you think you've got all these wonderful intents and stuff, and then it's just something so simple can trip you up, like getting a date of when something should happen. Because
that's a complex problem with a very simple solution.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like because the LLM doesn't know what day it is, so you're always left at that messy starting point. It's quite messy.
Yeah, there are workarounds, but you never know when they are gonna backfire on you. Like when someone tells you something about December, you don't know if it's something that they are referring to in the past or if it's gonna happen in next December if they don't specify the year. So there are all these corner cases with dates that you don't wanna get into it.
Exactly, and like 1/6/2024, is that the 1st of January, or is that the 6th of January, or the 1st of June?
Day, month,
yeah. So, and as well, because I mean we're 24/7, so you know your date there, is that the date here? Is this, So yeah. Anyway, moral of the story is date picker, please, lads. Cool, excellent. All right, well, thanks very much for joining me. It was great to hear more on where we're at, and next week, I think we are looking at Atlas Ticket, and possibly the week after it's Voiceflow, and maybe starting to look at what some of the agents are doing it from an AI perspective. But thank you again, lads, and hopefully see everybody in the next one.
Thank you, Colin.